an entire town, with its houses, schools, and factories abandoned by every single resident in a single day, leaving all their worldly possessions behind. The reason? It wasn't a plague, and it wasn't a war. The reason was a terrifying creature that forced them to establish 5 strict rules of survival. Anyone who broke them ended up as a dismembered corpse or with their skull completely shattered. This isn't a fictional horror story. This is the chilling reality of the ghost town of Portlock. In 1973, 3 experienced hunters, Ed, Dennis, and Joe, decided to venture deep into the Alaskan wilderness to spend a few days in a remote area called Dogfish Bay, located in the southernmost part of the Kenai Peninsula. Suddenly, the weather turned violently, bringing torrential rain and fierce winds that made it impossible for them to sail back. Forced to stay, they pitched their tent for the night. At exactly 2 a.m., Ed woke up to Dennis frantically tapping his leg, gesturing for absolute silence. In that moment, they heard the distinct sound of tree branches snapping outside. Heavy, slow, deep footsteps that sounded nothing like a wild animal. The footsteps approached until they stopped directly outside the tent door, then vanished. When morning came, they rationalized that it must have been a bear and decided not to tell Joe to avoid panic. But the following night, at 2:30 a.m., the nightmare returned. Ed woke up to find both Dennis and Joe awake in sheer terror, with Joe gripping his rifle. This time, the footsteps were unmistakably human-like, but belonging to something massive, circling the tent before halting just meters from the entrance. Summoning their courage, they rushed outside, but found absolutely nothing. They spent a 3rd night in tense anticipation, but the sound never returned. At the very first light of dawn, they packed their gear and fled. Sometime later, Ed was flipping through an old Alaskan sports magazine when he stumbled upon an article about that very same area. The article revealed that it was once a booming cannery town that suddenly transformed into a ghost town because its workers began vanishing mysteriously, only for their mangled bodies to be found later. Long before the town of Portlock even existed, these forests were virtually untouched, rich in wildlife and fish. Yet, the native people avoided them entirely, bound by an unwritten law passed down through generations. Never approach the abandoned forest, due to an eternal sense of dread and foreboding. In 1780, a group of Spanish explorers was drifted ashore by the current. Mesmerized by the breathtaking scenery, they decided to camp and explore the woods. Suddenly, everyone was struck by identical, bizarre symptoms: a sharp ringing in the ears, dizziness, nausea, and the sound of blood-curdling screams echoing from the depths of the forest. As the symptoms escalated to vomiting and fainting, they fled the area immediately, keeping it a secret out of fear of being labeled insane. 6 years later, in 1786, Royal Navy Captain Nathaniel Portlock arrived on a commercial fur trading expedition. Amazed by the abundant fish and wildlife, he settled there with his crew. Within days, however, the exact same symptoms struck: dizziness, nausea, and a suffocating feeling of being watched from between the trees. At his workers' desperate insistence, the captain agreed to abandon the site, noting the mysterious illness in his journals. From that point on, the area became known as Portlock. In 1867, a native tribe called the Sugpiaq decided to defy the legends and settle there to harvest the incredible abundance of salmon and clams. Their joy was short-lived. The familiar symptoms returned, followed by the terrifying sound of unknown footsteps circling their homes at night, stolen fishing nets, and a horrific howling that resembled no known wild animal. They chose to abandon the land to save their lives. In 1905, an American fishing company decided to dismiss these superstitions as mere myths and opened a massive salmon cannery, hiring local workers who took the jobs out of sheer necessity. Shortly after, 3 workers went into the forest to hunt and never returned. At first, everyone assumed they had either migrated or fallen victim to a wild animal. But days later, the workers discovered the body of one of their missing companions floating near the shore. It was completely mutilated, with its limbs torn apart. The coroner was horrified by the state of the corpse, stating definitively that this level of destruction could not have been caused by any ordinary wild predator. The residents immediately linked the tragedy to a local ancient legend about a creature known as the Nantiinaq, meaning the entities that steal. It was described as a massive hair-covered beast that walked on 2 legs, inhabited the deep woods, hated humans intensely, and tore bodies apart with its bare giant hands. They realized the physical symptoms of dizziness and nausea were caused by the creature emitting infrasound, low-frequency vibrations used by certain apex predators to disorient and paralyze their prey. The terrified workers went on strike, demanding to leave, forcing the cannery owners to bring in armed guards just to secure their exit. Yet, driven by harsh economic conditions, most workers returned 2 years later. To protect themselves, they established 5 strict rules of safety. First, wandering into the forest was strictly forbidden. Second, no one was allowed to leave their homes on days with heavy fog. Third, no one could stray from the main cannery path or remain outside after sunset. Fourth, anyone who felt sudden dizziness or nausea had to flee the area immediately. And fifth, the most important rule of all, opening the doors of the houses at night was strictly prohibited no matter what sounds were heard outside. Thanks to these strict rules, the vanishing stopped and the village flourished. By 1921, the government officially recognized the community, opening a U.S. post office, a school, a coal mine, and logging mills, turning Portlock into a thriving settlement. In 1923, a 16-year-old local named Sergius Moonen broke the rules. While walking along the beach, he came face to face with a giant hair-covered creature holding a massive tree branch, eating fish straight from the nets. He fled and told the villagers, but they refused to believe him. Yet strange sightings multiplied, such as finding massive trees completely ripped from their roots in ways impossible for humans. Then, in 1931, the ultimate turning point occurred with the murder of a logger named Andrew Kamluk. He had stayed late in the forest, and the villagers found him dead, his blood soaking the ground and his skull completely crushed. Right next to the body, they found a heavy piece of steel logging equipment bent out of shape and covered in blood. A piece of machinery so heavy it required 4 men just to lift it. This proved that whoever or whatever did this possessed superhuman strength. Entering the 1940s, more hunters vanished, and residents began finding terrifying physical evidence in the mud. Giant, clawless, human-like footprints measuring up to 46 centimeters long, and massive trees ripped out of the ground and replanted into the earth upside down. The residents could no longer endure the terror. In a single day, in 1949, The entire population of Portlock, without exception, abandoned their jobs, homes, and schools, fleeing the town en masse and leaving everything behind. The only person who refused to leave was the postmaster, who lived in the village completely alone for an entire year, hoping the people would return. During that year, he sent continuous letters of complaint to officials, swearing that he heard giant footsteps circling the post office and felt a constant, terrifying presence watching him. Finally, he too succumbed to the terror and fled in 1950, officially leaving Portlock as a ghost town, swallowed by the wilderness. In 2018, a modern research team called Extreme Expeditions Northwest attempted to solve the mystery. They ventured into the area equipped with thermal cameras and advanced surveillance gear to document the existence of the Nantiinaq. However, they returned without any definitive physical evidence, leaving the story of Portlock forever suspended between chilling fact and terrifying legend.